I've always been a light sleeper. Every little sound pulls me from the edge of dreams. A creak in the floorboards, the distant hum of traffic, the faint sigh of wind outside my window. Insomnia has been my unwelcome companion for years, an ever-present shadow that refuses to let me rest. But last night was different. Last night sleep finally found me, and I wish it hadn't. It started in the middle of the night, that fragile hour where the world holds its breath and silence hangs heavy in the air. I was deep in the kind of restless sleep where your body lies heavy, but your mind never truly lets go. Then I heard it. At first it was faint, like the echo of a whisper carried on the wind. A voice, soft and familiar, calling my name.
Lena.
It was my mom's voice, gentle, soothing, the way she used to call me for dinner when I was a kid. It didn't make sense. My mom was miles away, asleep in her own bed. But in that hazy space between dreams and waking, it didn't register as strange.
Lena.
This time, it was different, sharper, closer. I stirred, the sound pulling me toward wakefulness. My eyelids fluttered, but I didn't open them. Something deep inside me whispered, "Don't look." The voice called again, and this time it wasn't just my mom.
Lena, wake up.
It was my dad's voice now, and my sister's, and my best friend's. More voices joined in, overlapping, blending together into a cacophony of sound. They called my name over and over, each one distinct and recognizable. My late grandmother, my old high school teacher, even the barista from the coffee shop down the street.
Lena, wake up, Lena.
Open your eyes. Open your eyes, Lena. Wake up, Lena.
The voices surrounded me, filling the room, pressing down on me like a physical weight. I kept my eyes closed. I lay there, frozen, listening to the eerie symphony of voices. My heart raced so fast I thought it might burst, but I kept my eyes shut tight. No matter how loud they got, no matter how insistent, I refused to open them. The air in the room felt thick, heavy, and cold, and I could hear faint rustling, like someone was moving around me. The voices were so close now, I could feel their presence, almost like they were leaning over me, but I didn't look. I couldn't. In my culture, there's a belief that every home has a protective spirit, a guardian angel of sorts. It's their job to keep bad things out, to maintain the balance. And as I lay there, trapped in that oppressive darkness, I was furious with mine. Where was my house spirit? Why weren't they protecting me from this? As I felt the presence of those voices growing stronger, I thought about another belief. Sometimes spirits reveal themselves to you, not just through vision, but through sound or smell, because they want something. They're asking you to make merit for them, to send them blessings. But I wasn't in a generous mood. With my eyes clenched shut, trembling in fear, I let my anger rise. If you don't stop now, I thought bitterly, you'll never get anything from me. No merit, no blessings, nothing. You woke me up. You scared me. You don't deserve it. The voices wavered, their tone shifting. They weren't as loud anymore, and I almost felt like they were hesitating. I held on to that thought, repeating it over and over in my mind like a shield. Stop now, or you'll get nothing from me. And just like that, they stopped. The room fell silent. The air grew lighter, and the oppressive weight that had pinned me to the bed lifted. I stayed there, motionless, too afraid to move. But I kept my eyes shut. I didn't dare look. Eventually, exhaustion overtook me, and I drifted back to sleep. When I woke up, the sunlight was streaming through the window, and everything felt normal. My room was just as I'd left it. No sign of the strange presence from the night before. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it hadn't been a dream. It had been too real. The voices, the cold, the weight in the air. In the days that followed, I kept thinking about what had happened. The fear lingered, but so did the guilt. What if they really were spirits, desperate for someone to help them move on? What if they needed me to send them blessings, and I'd refused? I couldn't ignore the thought any longer. A few days later, I went to the temple. I made offerings, and dedicated the merit to any spirits who might have been there that night. I prayed for them to find peace, to move on to wherever they were meant to go. After that, the house felt different, lighter, warmer. And I never heard those voices again. I still think about that night sometimes, about the strange, oppressive feeling and the way the voices had called my name. I don't know if it was my imagination, a trick of my sleep-deprived mind, or something else entirely. But one thing's for sure, I'll never take the peace of an undisturbed night for granted again.
We'd been married for about 4 years when I found out I was pregnant. My Norwegian husband, Eric, decided it was time to stop renting and buy a house of our own. We were living in a tiny flat in Oslo, and with a baby on the way, he wanted more space for a nursery and a garden where our dog could roam. But finding a house in Norway wasn't easy. Prices were sky high, and the market was fiercely competitive. We started searching for a home right after I got pregnant, thinking we'd find something quickly. We were wrong. Nearly 2 years passed as we combed through listings, went to open houses, and got outbid again and again. By the time we finally found the house, I'd already given birth to our son Noah, and he was turning 1. Eric was the one who discovered it. It was an old property on the outskirts of Bergen, nestled in a quiet valley surrounded by forest. He said it was perfect, spacious, charming, and most importantly, within our budget. The price was surprisingly low for the area, but we were desperate by then. Eric took care of the paperwork while I stayed home with Noah. I hadn't even seen the house in person when we signed the contract. When Eric finally took me to see it, I felt a strange unease as soon as we pulled into the driveway. The house was older than I'd imagined, a 2-story wooden structure with peeling white paint and a sagging roof. It sat between 2 abandoned properties, their gardens overgrown and fences crumbling. Thick trees loomed at the edge of the yard, casting long shadows over the house, even in daylight. Inside, the house smelled faintly of mildew and something else, something metallic. The floors creaked loudly with every step, and the air felt heavy, almost oppressive. Eric led me upstairs, proudly showing off the rooms, but I stopped dead when we reached one of them. The door was locked, and I instinctively knew I didn't want to see what was inside. As soon as he pushed the door open, a wave of dread swept over me, and I immediately wished he hadn't. What made me freak out was the floor. It was covered with old ritual offerings, black incense sticks in a pot, bottles of something I couldn't identify, and there were burn marks on the floor. The agent who had met Eric the first time had casually mentioned that the previous owner's son used the room for his rituals. Apparently, the son was involved in some kind of cult, and the reason they were selling the house was that the husband and wife had split up and had been living separately for a long time. The son was the only one who still came to this house every now and then for his rituals. That's what the agent told us. I told my husband I didn't like it at all. He said not to worry, because they'd renovate everything inside, keeping only the exterior. That made me feel a little better. But still, something didn't sit right. Eric was determined to make this house a home. We spent months renovating, tearing down everything that made the place feel old and oppressive. The room with the altar was gutted. New floors, fresh paint. No trace of the symbols or the charred marks left behind. When it was all done, the house looked like a different place. Bright, clean, modern. For a while, I tried to settle in. I tried to push the memory of that room out of my mind, to believe that it was just an ugly part of the past that we'd erased with the renovations. But deep down, the unease lingered. It clung to me like a shadow, quiet but insistent, as if the house itself wasn't ready to let us forget. The first sign that something was wrong came from our dog. He flat out refused to go upstairs. He would sit at the bottom of the staircase, staring up at the landing, growling softly. At night, I started hearing faint creaking noises from the floorboards above. Eric said it was just the old house settling, but it didn't feel like that to me. Then, Noah started talking. He was 2 by then, babbling in short sentences. One day, I found him sitting in the hallway, giggling and whispering. I asked him who he was talking to, and he said, "The man upstairs." My stomach dropped. It wasn't just once. Noah would sit at the bottom of the stairs, pointing at nothing, laughing and chatting as if someone was there. Sometimes, he'd come running to me, saying, "The man wants to play with me." At night, he'd wake up screaming that the man was in his room. He stopped sleeping in his own bed altogether, clinging to me like his life depended on it. I couldn't ignore it anymore. One evening, when Eric was away on a work trip, I decided to confront the locked room. I took the key, climbed the stairs, and opened the door. The renovations had erased the physical signs of the past, but as soon as I stepped inside, the air turned icy. I felt an overwhelming sense of dread, like I was being watched. In the center of the room, the floor was blackened, the same charred, circular patterns that had been there before. Symbols we had painted over were faintly visible again, bleeding through the fresh paint. Then I smelled it. The sharp, acrid scent of incense filled the room. It grew stronger with every passing second, even though there wasn't a single candle or stick burning. The stench clung to the back of my throat, and I had the overwhelming sense that someone was standing right beside me, just out of view. I froze, unable to move or breathe. My heart thundered in my chest, but the breaking point came when I heard it. The unmistakable sound of claws raking across the wallpaper. The scratching was deliberate, slow, and filled with malice, as though something unseen wanted me to know it was there. I screamed, spinning around to flee, but before I could take a step, I felt it. A breath, warm and close, ghosted over my ear, followed by a deep guttural whisper. "Yes, you better go now." The voice was chilling, low and far too close. Panic overtook me. I ran out of the room, tears streaming down my face as I screamed for Noah. My legs felt like they could give out at any second. But I didn't stop until I reached him. I grabbed him, holding him tight, and fled the house without looking back. By the time I got outside, I was hysterical, gasping for air, and shaking so badly I could barely stand. I haven't stepped foot in that house since, and I don't think I ever will. Whatever is in that room, it doesn't want us there. And I have no intention of going back to find out what happens if we stay. My husband moved our stuffs out shortly after. I didn't care about the money we'd spent or the financial strain of leaving so soon. I just couldn't stay in that house. Even now, Noah sometimes talks about the man in passing, as if he's still with us. I don't have the heart to ask him what he means. I'm afraid of the answer.
A few years ago, I decided to take a solo trip to a quiet little town in northern Thailand called Lampang. Known for its old temples, horse-drawn carriages, and slow pace of life, it felt like the perfect place to escape the chaos of the city. The air was cool, the streets were lined with teakwood houses, and the town carried a deep sense of history. What I didn't expect was to experience something that still lingers in my thoughts to this day. I stayed at a small boutique hotel, a former colonial-style mansion that had been converted into a guest house. The building itself was stunning, with intricate wooden carvings, wide verandas, and creaky floors that whispered of the past. When I checked in, the owner mentioned that the house was over 100 years old and had been many things in its lifetime: a wealthy family's home, a Buddhist meditation retreat, and even a makeshift hospital during the war. I didn't think much of it at the time. History was everywhere in Lampang. After a day of exploring old temples and sipping coffee by the river, I returned to the hotel, exhausted but content. My room was simple but elegant, with antique furniture and a view of the overgrown garden outside. The quiet was almost unnerving. No traffic, no city noise, just the sound of cicadas and the occasional rustle of leaves. I fell asleep easily that night, but something woke me up just before dawn. The room was dim, bathed in a soft, bluish light filtering through the curtains. For a moment I lay there trying to shake off the haze of sleep when I noticed something or someone in the corner of the room. She was standing near the window, just beside the old teak wardrobe. A woman in a white traditional Thai dress, her long dark hair flowing down her back. Her skin was pale, almost glowing, and her face was calm, almost kind, with a faint smile that felt both comforting and eerie at the same time. She wasn't transparent, but there was something otherworldly about her. I couldn't move, I couldn't even think. We just stared at each other in silence. Oddly enough, I didn't feel fear, just an overwhelming sense of stillness, as if time had stopped. Her presence was neither threatening nor welcoming. It was just there. Then, as suddenly as she appeared, she began to fade. Slowly, she dissolved into the shadows, her faint smile the last thing to vanish. I sat there, frozen, staring at the empty corner where she had been. The air felt heavier, as if she had left something behind. When morning came, I went to the lobby and hesitantly mentioned what I had seen to the hotel owner. She didn't look surprised. Instead, she gave me a small smile and said, "You must have met Mei Chao Fai. People see her now and then. She's harmless, just part of this place's history." Apparently, Mei Chao Fai was a spirit tied to the house, said to be a noblewoman from the family that originally built it. Guests had reported seeing her for decades, always described as calm, quiet, and dressed in white. The owner even had a small spirit house in the garden, dedicated to her. I didn't know what to make of it. Part of me wanted to dismiss it as a dream, but it felt too real, too vivid. Even now I can still picture her face in my mind, her serene smile etched into my memory. Whoever or whatever Mei Chao Fai was, she left me with a story I'll never forget.